Hello again. So today we're going to be talking about consequences. First of all, this is going to be a two-part video, so please make sure that you watch this one and then the next one, and it is in the link in lesson. They're linked in lesson 4 on the blog. So the first part of this video for consequences, we're just going to talk about when you should use consequences. So when you use a consequence with a child, it is an absolute last resort. Just as we've been talking about the pyramid of incredible years, you want to make sure that your child has had lots of child-led play. You want to make sure your child has had lots of praise. You want to make sure that you've given clear commands. You have effective limits for your child. You want to ignore some misbehavior, which we didn't talk about, but is pretty simple. And then finally, if all else fails, then you use a consequence. You want to make sure that the majority of a child's waking hours are not in a type of consequence. Okay, so with that said, Incredible Years sees consequences in 3 basic categories. They believe that consequences can be natural and logical consequences, loss of privileges, or timeout. So we're going to talk about those for just a little bit. With natural and logical consequences, those are the types of consequences where the child for some reason makes a choice that just is kind of like, well, there's just not a whole lot of other options other than to maybe take this route. And perhaps for a very logical child, there's not going to be a connection otherwise. So here are a few examples of natural and logical consequences. For older children who help with their laundry or do their own laundry, a natural and logical consequence of a child who does not do that chore, does not follow through with that, would be that they don't have clean clothes to wear. And when they come to you and say, Mom, I don't have clean jeans to wear today, you can say, oh, I'm sorry, but your chore is to do the laundry, or your chore is to put the laundry away after I do it, and you didn't, so you don't have clean clothes. Most children will not press when you enforce a natural logical consequence because they know, oh, wow, Mom, Dad means business, and boy, I better get my act together next time and I'm going to do my laundry. A lot of parents of younger children have issues with food. So let's say, for example, that you give your child meatloaf for dinner and your child hates meatloaf. So let's say you also provide another alternative, like you could have a bowl of cereal, or you could have a piece of fruit, or you could have an apple, or, well, apple, piece of fruit, yogurt, you know what I mean, something like that. Your child still refuses. But at bedtime, your child is suddenly hungry, has the urge to eat, and wants to know what you're going to make him or her. This would be a good instance to use natural and logical consequences. You could say, well, because I made you dinner, you chose not to eat that, and I offered you an alternative to dinner, and you refused the alternative. I'm sorry, but tonight you'll go to bed hungry because you chose not to eat. We don't want to deprive children of food. Food is always a bad example, but it's a good one for the little ones. Natural and logical consequences works a lot with teenagers. So I know a lot of you aren't experiencing that quite yet, but as your children grow and get older, that's something helpful to keep in mind. The loss of privileges is something that we just want to make sure that we go over at the beginning, is that loss of privilege is going to vary based on the child's age and their stage of development with their brain. For a child who is younger than 5, when you take away a privilege, you want to make sure that that privilege is not taken away for more than a few hours. This is just because their brain capacity does not understand a long-term cause and effect correlation / connection with what they did a couple hours ago. So if you tell your 5-year-old, you're grounded from TV for a week, very likely they are going to not remember, neither are you, they're not going to understand, and it's not going to connect for them as a consequence. For children who are school-agers that have a little bit more of a capacity to understand long-term consequences, you can take away a privilege for the evening. So if your child comes home from school, refuses to do homework, you always provide a warning before you give a consequence. So you would say, Matt, if you don't do your homework, I'm going to take away TV for the rest of the night. If Matt still refuses to comply and do his homework, TV is off for the rest of the night. Now, for a lot of you, I'm sure you're thinking, well, I was grounded as a kid, and I was. Not very often, but it's difficult to revert from that. So it might be a little bit changing your thinking, changing the way that you parent. The reason we don't extend consequences for children like that multiple days is that we don't want children to think that they are always in trouble or that they're a bad person. And we want to start each day as a clean slate and giving the child the chance to start fresh. Sorry, my cat is trying to get into my lap. Anyway, finally, timeout. Timeout, we have multiple types of timeout. We have timeout for aggressive behaviors like hitting, kicking, biting, pinching. You always put a child in timeout for those behaviors because the child needs to learn that those behaviors are not okay. You want to keep it very simple with a timeout for aggression and say something like, you hit, go to timeout. If your child does not walk to timeout on his or her own, you can put them in timeout. Typically there, you want to give that child a choice, and you want to say, you can either walk to timeout like a big boy or a big girl, or mommy or daddy will help you. And most children, when given that choice, because of their desire to be independent, do want to go on their own. It's your really defiant ones who will dig in their heels and say, okay, make me. And they usually get spaghetti legs or drag their feet or grab at tables or refrigerators or whatever is near them pretty much. So your child staying in timeout once you put them there, that's another topic that I can address individually if you have that issue. Most people just have trouble getting their children to timeout. Most of them don't have trouble getting them to stay there. Another thing with timeout, we want to make sure that we do a minute per year of however old the child is, up to 10 minutes or 10 years old. We don't want to exceed that. Now, if the child gets out of timeout or if the child does not calm his or her body while in timeout, you can extend it. So timeouts could easily take more time. The other type of timeout that we see is a timeout for noncompliance. So a noncompliance timeout is something like, Tommy, go brush your teeth. Tommy says no. So you're going to provide a warning. You're going to say, Tommy, if you do not brush your teeth, you are going to time out. If Tommy still says no, refuses to go, okay, you are not listening, go to timeout. And same thing, child resist. You have to. Do you want to be a big girl, big boy? Do you need mommy and daddy to help you? Anyway, once you get the child in timeout, they serve their minutes. You go back and you have to repeat the command. This is called compliance training. So for children who have a difficult time listening, following directions, this is very necessary. So once the timeout is over, you're going to say, Tommy, go brush your teeth. If Tommy says no, you provide a second warning. You say, Tommy, if you do not go brush your teeth, you will go back to timeout. And hopefully at that point, Tommy gets the message that, Mom, Dad, you're not giving up, so I'm just going to go ahead and go brush my teeth. Also, on the blog, there is a video example of timeout with my nephew. He went to timeout for aggressive behaviors, for hitting. Interestingly enough, it was obviously a rehearsed situation, and he tested it a little bit. So don't be surprised, especially if you haven't done timeout before, or after you do it a few times and it's not so new, that your children begin to test and see, oh, is mom or dad really going to stick with this? Because it's pretty natural. Most of them do. I didn't use the whole time of the timer with the example with my nephew, but just for time's sake. But also something to note, Incredible Years basically says when you send a child to timeout, no matter the age, you're looking for 2 minutes of calm quietness. And so if the child is calm and quiet in timeout for 2 minutes, you can choose as a parent to end timeout early. If you know your child well and know that his or her temperament is that they are going to be quiet but they're still stewing, you might want to leave them in the full amount of time. It's going to give them the time to calm their bodies, develop that self-control that a lot of kids that go to timeout do need. All right, so for more on timeout and consequences, see video 2.